Say black doesn't take the rook. He regrets his decision and goes back to g8. We attack again. Then he goes to h7. And this is a very good demonstration of this. Bishop here. The point of this move is that the queen has to take, right? She can't go to g8 because to g8 or h8 because the rook is controlling those squares. She is trapped by her own pawn, so her only choice is to take. Earlier, we had a move where the queen went to e6. So in this position, rook a6 wins the queen once again. This just goes to show that, like, when you see this position, it really seems like the queen has a lot of squares to go, right? The queen is the most powerful piece in the game. It can go in diagonals, it can go in files, it can go in ranks. And yet, in an open board, it gets dominated by a rook and a bishop. There's nowhere it can go. There's a special kind of tactic that mostly occurs in the opening, and that's called, and the tactic is called an attack on the f7 square. So if you look at your positions right now that you have on your chessboards, the f7 pawn, or the f2 pawn in white's case, is only being protected by the king. That makes that pawn the most vulnerable square in the opening, because then black can just castle and then the rook would protect the square. So let me just get the starting position here. So there's a really nice way to make use of the weakness of the f7 square, or the f2 square in white's case. And so let's say we're playing a normal game and we start with e4. We're opening up our bishop and our queen just to give us some more choices. Black repeats. We move our knight. He moves the pawn to protect this pawn, right? So our knight was attacking the e5 pawn. Plays d6 to protect this pawn. We play bishop c4. Now this move bishop c4 already sets up an attack on the f7 square, right? Black is a little bit clueless of white's plan, so he just continues his normal moves. He just develops his knight. White reciprocates, knowing that he has a plan in mind. And black plays the pin bishop g4. Now, in this position, we have a very nice way of making use of the weakness of f7 and the weakness of this bishop. The first step of the way would be just to kick the bishop out. Then, if black really tries to maintain this pin, right? It might look like the knight is pinned, right? White can actually play knight takes e5 here and be winning. This position is winning for white. If black takes the knight, we take the bishop with the queen, and we're a pawn up, we're attacking the f7 square. But what if black takes the queen? The motive of all of this attacking we had was f7, right? Bishop takes f7 check. Black has only one move, right? It cannot go to d7 because the knight controls it. It can't take the bishop because that's controlled by the knight also. So it only goes to e7. White can checkmate the black king in one move in this position. Does anyone see it?
d5.
Knight to d5, correct. Black's king has nowhere to go. e6 and e8 are covered by the bishop. d7 and d7 is covered by this knight actually, and f7 also. f6 is covered by the d5 knight, and the king has nowhere to go. In this game, your black opponent was really cooperative. Most opponents won't be falling for these kinds of tricks, but it was still a good reminder that you should try to be careful when trying to handle a position on f7. So these were some basic tactics that are involved in chess. Let's move on to strategies. So strategies are the same or similar to tactics in the way that they can be used to gain an advantage. However, strategy is used to gain an advantage without having to gain a material. So in tactics, in some way or another, we gained one of the opponent's pieces. We either won the queen, we either won a bishop, or a rook, or a knight, or even a pawn in some cases. With strategy, we are able to get a positional advantage. So that would mean that we have more space to move our pieces in. Or it can mean we have just a better pawn structure. It could even mean our pieces are just simply better placed. Those are all coming out of a good strategy. So the first kind of strategy is the space advantage. So I'll move on to here for a second. This is a position where white has a space advantage. It's quite obvious by the pawn structure here that white has definitely controlled the first 5 ranks. Black has most control over the 8th, the 7th, and the 6th rank, right? But white has much more space. Black's rooks and the queen don't look like they're doing much. They're kind of cramped up. White, in this position, has a very big advantage. He can just keep pushing his pawns forward and gain even more space, and then use a tactic to gain the victory. The third kind of strategy would be better piece positioning. So, who looks like has the better pieces in this position? Definitely seems like it's white, right? White has much better rooks, the knights are beautifully placed, and black has just really cramped up here. The rook is trapped actually, there's nowhere to go. That is the same to say with this knight, because it only could go h6 and that is blocked by his own pieces. If you did notice that in this position, white has also a pretty big space advantage. So having a space advantage that we discussed, like the first topic, allows us to have better piece positioning. We would not be able to control so many squares without the pawn structure that gives us space. Third kind of strategy, which I have been mentioning a little bit, is pawn structure. This really looks like a very fortified type of pawn position, right? And black's pawns seem really weak. They aren't really working together. They're just scattered throughout the chessboard. Once again, white has a very big space advantage here, right? Because once the black bishop is cramped because of this pawn structure here. So the main thing that I was trying to get to here is that strategies and tactics go hand in hand, right? So if you have a good strategy, you can set up a position in which you can use your tactics successfully. This also means that if you don't have a good strategy, the tactics you use in the position are likely to be unsuccessful.